Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Founders Crit, sponsored by Caper.io. Today we have Luckner. Luckner is the Director of Engineering at Kira Talent. Luckner, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mustafa. Thank you for having me.
So, a bit of background about yourself, what you've been doing prior to joining Kira Talent.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually been in the industry for about 13 years at this point. I started doing in-office tools for my customer service jobs in the very, very early days of my career. And then I went into consulting and built my career pretty much from there. And I've held roles from software developer to architect. I've co-founded a couple companies. And most recently, I spent the last 2 years as Kira's Director of Engineering.
Got it. And 4 years at Kira now, how's the journey been so far?
It's been great. It's been great. Actually, when I joined Kira as a software developer, I was coming from a PHP background. And so that was my first job where I managed to use Python on a day-by-day basis. And so it has revolutionized my career, I think, being able to try a brand new language, enter in a space that is so fantastic, serving admissions clients and their applicants, as well as just the growth that I've been able to see in my career. I always tell people, when I hop on interview calls, that there's a reason I've been here for almost 5 years. It's been a great experience so far, and I think it's going to continue to be a great one.
Got it. So, head of engineering at Kira, just trying to keep the conversation much more relevant towards today's time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Managing teams remotely, managing them through Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Skype, or whatever communication channels you folks are using, right? Or your own, right? So how has it been, managing teams online, especially engineering teams, and how's the experience been so far?
It's been interesting. I think some of us have known each other from before the pandemic, and so we were used to working together in office and having built a certain level of rapport and a certain relationship. We transitioned fairly easily into interacting with each other remotely. Whereas we've also added some new people over the course of the last year. And so we've had to, find different ways to onboard people, different ways to make sure that we keep track of what people are doing and going through on a day-by-day basis. Throw on top of that the personal challenges that everybody has been facing. And I think managing throughout this pandemic has been vastly different than managing pre-pandemic. It's definitely been, I've leaned a lot on my mentors and the rest of our leadership team at Kira to try and find ways to fine tune this and find ways to continue to get better at managing my team and being present for my team as much as possible.
Got it. So, before we move on to Zoom fatigues and, the activities you've taken in regards to managing that, any top three pieces of advice you would want to give out to startup founders, especially technical founders, when building a product? Any top three pieces of advice would you give to them to be aware of?
Yeah, I think one of them would be to always be hiring. Even if you don't have a position open, keep your warm bench going. We've had a number of hiring complexities over the last year, and obviously a warm bench would have made things a lot easier. So definitely, yeah, keep a warm bench while you're hiring. I think always be aware of your technical debt. It's things that grow very quickly or very subtly, and you wake up one day and you're like, oh, I actually have a lot of technical debt to address. So try and always iterate on that as much as possible. And I would say also just manage your team's workload. If when you hire rock stars, they're going to want to push for to build the best product. They're going to want to push past their fatigue and everything. But it's really important to be on top of that and to rein it back in when you realize that they're going to start being burnt out. And that's really a tough part of the job.
Got it. So now moving the conversation towards Zoom fatigue, mental health. Those are the kind of things, that started coming to discussion 7, 8 months ago, right?
Yeah.
So, did you face those challenging being the director of engineering, and what steps you started taking at your organization for your team and things like those?
Yeah, it's definitely something that we've experienced and that I've experienced personally. I mean, I'm on Zoom, I feel the whole day between hiring calls, between, checking in with the rest of the leadership team, checking in with my team members, hopping on various meetings as they come about. I feel like we spend, most of our day on Zoom, especially at this kind of managerial level. Even for our team members, it's been fatiguing. Even developers, they also have to spend a fair amount of time on Zoom, and that also does distract them from being able to do their regular work or the actual work that really they're brought on board for. So what we've done is we try to limit the Zoom meetings that we have. If we can extend the current meeting that we're in to kind of discuss something that we know we're going to have to talk about, then let's discuss it. If we if we realize that we've talked about what we need to talk about in the meeting, then we'll cut it. There's no point having the whole meeting. If we've discussed it, we've discussed it. We can move on with the rest of our days. And we also try to really have a lot of conversations on Slack to try and reduce the amount of in-person meetings or online in-person meetings that we need to have. And a lot of our team has been fairly used to having Slack conversations. So that's been, kind of an easy transition for us to continue doing.
So, next question, direct back to your role as director of engineering and hiring remote teams in different time
Mhm.
zones. When I say about different time zones, they can be remote anywhere in the world, work operating in different time zones. So the pros, the cons, and how to make them work as a synergy. Do you have any expertise with that?
Yeah, I actually used to do remote work early on in my career. And so that was always interesting to try and balance that, especially as you're learning the ropes of the industry and working remotely. Definitely gives you a different perspective. But, speaking more recently, Kira has always leveraged remote work to a certain extent. So we've had people either past Kira employees or people that we've brought on completely externally that have helped us on specific projects. Some of them have been based in Toronto, where we're currently located, and some of them have been, based halfway across the world. We're actually working right now with a former Kira employee who is in Japan, and we make it work. It's difficult. It means a lot of 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m. calls sometimes to sync up, but we make it work. I think the what has helped us the most has been to really refine our documentation process, really putting a lot of effort into documenting the right things and putting enough context so that when we go to sleep and these people wake up to do their work, they have everything they need to actually be productive until we get to sync up the next time.
Got got it. So last question, in regards to uh, your own personal productivity hacks. We, I, I'm really enjoying the conversation, but we have to keep these podcasts within 8 to 12 minutes. So
I
last,
understand. Yeah.
in regards to your own personal productivity hacks, I believe you're in Toronto and Toronto is under lockdown. So the whole year, many of us have been, yeah, it's unfortunate times, just keeping sane, being productive, especially living in big cities where spaces are limited. How are you kind of like coping up with that, and what personal daily routines you've adopted?
Yeah, I think over the course of the last year, I've tried various things. Some of the things that have worked for me personally is been making better use of my calendar. So my calendar now is no longer just for the meetings that I have with people, but it's also as a way for me to block off specific chunks of time to do specific work. For example, I start my day with hiring every single day. So I go through resumes, I set up calls, I review all these things, I look into my pipeline. And that helps me to stay on top of hiring in the midst of what is incredibly busy days left, right, and center. I think also splitting my days has also helped. I have two young kids at home, and my wife often needs me to be present, obviously. And so I've been able to, put in a full day of work, but sometimes I'll hop off a little bit earlier to provide some help at home, and then I'll hop back on to finish my work later in the evening once the kids have gone to sleep. So being able to kind of rejig my life or my work around my life and my life around my work and kind of synergize them together has been probably one of the biggest changes that I've been able to make over the course of the last year.
Luckner, thank you so much for being on the show. It was great having you. We'll definitely have you as a guest for one of our webinars where we could speak longer. But thank you so much for being on the podcast and take care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
And